welcome back and happy Tuesday. I'm sitting here with my dear friend Shamir Karkal, who is CEO and co-founder of Sila Money. And Shamir and I actually met through a previous role that we both had with BBVA. And I did it wrong again. There you go, BBVA. So Shamir, it's a pleasure to be catching up with you. We're here in Europe. We've been talking all about the API economy and what that means for the future of financial services. So can you just give us a quick overview of who Sila is and why are you doing this? So let me just give you a little bit quick background on Shamir. So he was co-founder of Simple Bank, which was one of the first neobanks. That was 10 years ago.
Yes.
And then joined BBVA as the head of open platform. So why Sila, why now, and what are you doing?
Yeah, so Sila fundamentally is a fintech API platform. Right? We enable ID verification, bank account linking, and ACH today, and we're adding cards, checks, wires, all the payment platforms out there. And really what we're trying to build is a programmable layer of money. Right? So if you want to build anything in the financial space, you could come to us, build it on top of our APIs, and ship it to your customers, and do that in a matter of weeks, not years. And this is really born from my own sort of personal experience building and launching Simple. Right? 10 years ago, I was living in Europe, in Brussels, and a classmate from business school sent me an email saying, "Let's start a retail bank." And it'll tell you how crazy I am that I actually thought that in 2009 that was a good idea. And I was working as a consultant in Europe, and my last project before that was a $1 trillion bank reconstruction. So I had more experience shutting down banks than starting them at that point. But the value proposition was so compelling, it was so clear. Everybody hated their banks, and we were like, we can build a better one, so let's do it, right? And moved back to New York and started on the journey of Simple. It actually took us 3 years to build and launch Simple. And that was not because we don't know how to code. It's because we couldn't get a bank charter. We couldn't buy a bank. And the only way then was to find a partner bank, then find a processor, because banks don't have technology,
Right.
Figure out how to connect them, then build our APIs on top. By this time, we realized the first bank wouldn't work, so find another one, then rebuild, then ship to customers. And that's just, it takes 2 minutes to say that, but that was a multi-year journey.
Oh yeah, and a lot of learnings, I'm sure, throughout the process.
Completely.
Because you were the first to do that.
Exactly, but it's not gotten much better. You talk to Valentin Stalf at number 26, or the folks at Varo, or it still takes like 2 years.
Yeah.
Maybe not 2.5 to 3. If you know what you're doing now, you can shave 6 months. But it's not 6 weeks to build and ship. And that was what frustrated me. And so then in 2014, after BBVA acquired Simple, so one of the executives there mentioned this idea of building an API platform. And my immediate reaction was like, yes, please, do it. The world needs API platforms in banking. If such a thing had existed, it wouldn't have taken Josh and me 2.5 years to launch Simple. So I was like, well, and they were like, that's great, but I really don't know anything about it. They bounced me somebody else. Finally realized it was just an idea. They hadn't even put a deck together, so I did. And I said, please do this, please don't do this. And a year later, I was running that business. And we built and launched the API platforms, but I realized that kind of there's only so much change that you can make within a large bank at a certain speed. And I could build a team. You were on the team as well. We could build and ship the APIs, but we couldn't change the compliance, risk, legal, and bank strategic issues, which meant that it still took 2 years. Now it was not in coding, it was in other things. And so that was frustrating. And so I left BBVA in 2017, and I was like, this problem is not solved by a long shot. It still takes very, very long, and it's just too hard. And I started thinking about how we could actually do it, but do it on a much broader scale. Let's not just do it in 1 country or 6 countries. How do we build a programmable layer of money for the entire internet, right? And what does that take? And that's where Sila comes from.
Love it. So outside of your day job, you are a big angel investor. You've done a lot of angel investments. So from your perspective, so tell me about, because you've seen it outside of just Sila and this. It's the end of 2020. What has changed in the industry at large?
Well, the end of 2020 is only like 18 months away, right? So I don't expect a revolutionary change in this 18-month time frame, but there's a lot of things that are happening which people haven't quite realized yet, and those I think will become a lot more apparent. I think some of the bigger fintechs out there, TransferWise, which I'm an angel investor in, so I got to rep them. But I think they're already big. They've already become pretty close to being a household name in Europe.
Yeah.
In like USA or India or in Southeast Asia, almost nobody's heard of them, right? So you'll start seeing that happening in those countries as well, and their growth will just continue. It's kind of the reverse is true with Stripe, right? Like Stripe's not a household name, but it's kind of well known in the development community in the US, but not necessarily in other parts of the world. I think that's going to go the other way, where Stripe launches in a lot more countries, scales up much more, and just continues like building and shipping both of these companies, and then also Square. So you'll see these like later stage fintechs. Like if you look at PayPal now, it's been around for like 20 plus years. You don't even think of it as a fintech,
Nope.
but it is one. It's like a $100 billion plus company. I think you'll see Stripe and TransferWise and Square and some of the others go on that same journey and just keep getting bigger and bigger, and then people will realize that, guess what? The global advertising industry is about 600 billion to 1 trillion in revenues, which is what Facebook and Google and everybody on the internet is all excited about. Global financial services is 15 trillion in annual revenue. The world does not run on advertising. It runs on manufacturing, transportation, agriculture, and finance. Like those are the big building blocks, and the internet has barely touched them.
Well, and it's interesting too that you mentioned the Stripe thing, because actually you must be you see things ahead of time, because Patrick was just on the main stage.
I know.
And so he was talking about some of that expansion as well, and what Africa being exciting, and
yes.
Poland and a few other places.
Oh, there's so much happening in Africa, Southeast Asia, in India, which I think is actually way more exciting, because there the change happens much more rapidly. Because in the US and in Europe, 80%, 90% of people have a bank account, right? So when you get a bank account on your phone, that's better, but it's not that revolutionary. When you go to a place like India, and you're like, there's 500 million people who bought their first smartphone in the last 2 years, and they're now going to get their first bank account ever, and this is their first time they have had any money which wasn't in paper or coin.
100%. Well, exactly, and I think so. That's so true, because I've spent a lot of time with some of the speakers here, and if I could say and condense what they said, it was really about the democratization of fintech and finance.
Yeah.
And that's essentially very, very true especially true in the emerging markets. So, perfect. Well, thank you so much. I, as always, appreciate your time, and please click the link below. You will see the rest of Shamir's interview, which has a lot of other interesting details that we did not talk about today. And until next week, happy Tuesday.